Hello, good evening. Welcome to today's episode of News Decoded, a Friday with rather heavy news day. I'm Nagendar Sharma. I'm joined by my old colleague and now the CEO of Earshot, Gaurav Choudhury, with whom I've spent years discussing so many issues, doing stories jointly. Gaurav, it's a heavy news day for a Friday. The Reserve Bank of India has announced the monetary policy. There's bad news on Russia-Ukraine war. 39 people have been killed in a rocket attack. Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan is to address the nation and we do not know what will happen there. But the reason that today I have taken your time is not all this. The central government has announced that the precaution dose, or what we now call commonly across the globe, the booster dose for COVID-19 to combat the coronavirus pandemic, the booster dose for all adults eligible, all 18 and above, is being opened from Sunday in private clinics. It is going to be a paid dose. It is going to be and this is the reason, Gaurav, that today we have you on the show again, because the issue that concerns all of us, nobody thought 2 years back the world would change like this. So, Gaurav, I would like your take that it's not a surprise that the booster dose, the precaution dose, as is being said in the government terminology, has been finally opened. But why do you think it has been right now kept paid? Why only in the private sectors?
I think there are a couple of reasons here. First of all, thank you so much for having me here again. We are having this discussion exactly a year after India witnessed the deadliest of COVID.
Absolutely, the devastating
Delta wave in April last year.
Absolutely.
And almost all families had some sad story to tell, sad tale to tell. Also, please remember that by some strange coincidence also, it was around this time only that the second or the vaccines were actually opened up for the 18 to 45 or above age group. Last year.
Absolutely right.
So exactly after a year, the government decided to do government opened up vaccination for all adults. The government is now opening up for booster shots for the same set of adults.
And Gaurav, there has to be a 9 month, after your second dose,
correct,
there needs to be a 9 month gap.
Yes.
Which is a protocol.
So what the medical community experts who have been tracking this for a long time, over the last 2 years, have said that on an average, it is found out, although that's subject to all kinds of peer-reviewed medical investigation and examination, is that on an average, the immunity of vaccine or of COVID, if anyone has suffered from COVID, got infected by COVID, stays for about, vaccination immunity stays for about 8 months or so. So it's about time that most of the people who would have got the second doses, and if you had noticed the trend, the maximum second doses were probably received around somewhere between September to December, or September to November, around this time. And that was when the time when we had achieved more than 1 crore doses on several days together. On a cumulative basis, India has administered so far 185 crore COVID vaccine doses, 1.85 billion. That's by far the highest in the world. And for a country of this size, this complexity, it's no mean achievement. The coming to the question why this has been kept for open for the private sector to begin with and not open it up the entire government. So I think that's a matter of distribution. Government would first like those who can afford to take the doses first, and then I think the government is expecting fresh doses of supplies to come in. And also the reason is that those between 12 to 15 are getting the first or maybe the second doses between April and May. Once those are more or less, about close to 70-80% of that cohort of people or that cohort of children actually get the second doses, which I assume would be around May, then probably the government will open it up for everyone or even in free government hospitals and clinics and facilities. But the reason the government has opened it up only in the private sector for now and for those who can afford it is, I think, just a function of distribution and supplies. I think more supplies are expected in the next 4 to 6 weeks. That is when it will open it up.
And Gaurav, I also feel that, this scale, there have been vaccination programs in countries, including India. But this kind, the way the world was hit by a pandemic, we do not know what happened during the Spanish flu, how it was controlled. So this kind of a global vaccination exercise, now when another dose is required, the third dose essentially for all the adults. Also, do you think that this paid thing is to allow the companies, manufacturing the vaccine, to allow them a window so that, they have a little bit of elbow room, they have a little bit of reserve, they have a little bit of financial elbow to manufacture the third dose?
That's right.
What do you think?
Yeah, so as I said, it was essentially more a function of supply management than anything. But there is another thing here. This is the time, over the last 3-4 weeks, we have noticed that people have started returning to office, and many offices now in the big metropolitan cities, which are the growth centers of the country, are functioning now at almost 100% capacity physically.
Schools have reopened. Markets are bustling.
Correct. So I would expect most private offices to actually come out with policies where they're going to sponsor the booster shots for their employees who have returned or who are returning to office. But the reason is that while it will be a welfare measure for the employees, but it also acts as a preventive for these offices not to shut down if there was an outbreak of COVID within their own premises. So just to prevent an outbreak or some kind of a community outbreak within offices and factories, it will always be a good idea if factories, offices, and private establishments and large organizations actually start some kind of a drive for their employees to get their booster shots as quickly as possible from private medical establishments, so that it acts as a preventive for outbreak within the premises of this office.
Yes, Gaurav, though we are not medical experts, but you mentioned the lethal and deadly Delta wave, which probably the world and India should never see again. But what has been happening after that? If we just review the last year, or beginning this year, that there was another variant, Omicron, and only medical experts can tell would there be mutation, would there be another variant or not. But looking at the global experience, looking at even the countries which are passing through a bad phase right now, it doesn't look like that there would be a need, though it is difficult to hazard a guess with this pandemic, that there would ever be a need in the near future to shut down institutions and all the way the world is moving. Because Gaurav, it is the time that the economy is looking up, normalcy is returning, booster dose may have come at the right time. But do you still think that there could be an element of fear that, things could slow down again?
I do not think so. And going by what's happening in Europe, even in England and Great Britain, there are cases and instances where there's a new variant that has been detected, but life hasn't stopped. Correct. As it had done in the case of Delta or previous waves. The reason is, one, the recovery rate seems to be far faster, although data is still being examined, and second, it's not deadly. So so far we haven't seen in a post-Omicron wave in any country,
any major disruption,
any country minus China, where the hospital establishments or infrastructure have been
being overwhelmed. Yes.
Even in the case of Omicron in India, the hospital establishments were not. There were far fewer hospitalizations and far fewer. There was no rush of people looking for oxygen supplies, and there was the blaring noise of ambulances, which is haunting, did not exist, was almost non-existent during the Omicron wave, which is a good sign. Means that it's far less deadlier than what it was during Delta, and one would expect that the succeeding variants subsequently get weaker and weaker and weaker, and eventually mutate into something that it becomes as common as common cold. That is at least a hope.
Which the leading medical experts across the globe are also saying. Another thing interlinked with the pandemic, apart from the horrible experiences, people lost their near and dear ones. One thing which was the most hardest hit was the economy. So today, when the booster dose has been announced in the morning, there was the monetary policy announcement by the Reserve Bank of India. do you think the shadow of COVID is still looming large?
Well, and not as much as it was before. The economy is on in recovery mode. It has recovered substantially, not yet fully though, because the COVID and the subsequent lockdown and the restrictions it resulted in loss of lives, livelihood, had caused a debilitating, devastating impact on the economy. There's no gainsaying that fact. That fact can never be overemphasized. Having said that, the Indian economy, particularly businesses, have shown tremendous resilience and tremendous enterprise to bounce back from such a debilitating effect. Right now, the economy is on a recovery mode. People are returning to offices, and there are traffic jams on roads. Traffic jams on roads is actually a good sign. It's a signal. It signals that the economy is moving at a far faster clip than it was, say, about a year ago. So it's expanding. Factories are producing more goods. Services are being rendered at a faster clip. And at some point in time, if this sustains, incomes will also start rising, and then people will start spending, and which means consumption, which actually is the main driver of the Indian economy, will start acting as it were about two and a half years ago, which is the main engine of India's growth story. So at no point in time can India afford any further lockdowns or restrictions. It is something that the businesses know, that the government knows, that policymakers know, and individuals and peoples have also started real acknowledging. That is the reason, as I said at the outset, it's in the interest of companies, it's the interest of private organizations, it's the interest of all organizations, it's the interest of factories and anyone who's running an establishment to get themselves and their employees administered with the third dose to prevent any kind of a third wave or fourth wave outbreak within their own community outbreaks, within their own organizations. That's the best thing to do, because in the absence of lack of knowledge of the virus, which is still, people are still discovering newer things about the virus. The only arsenal that humanity has against this virus
is the vaccine
and the booster shots. That is something that we need to take. And that is why I think organizations will probably you'll see more and more announcements or read more about such organizations.
Incentives, encouragements,
yes.
and Gaurav, also we do not know whether the booster dose may actually, though it is for the medical experts to tell, might actually become an annual affair.
It might
not known.
It might be. So we're quite familiar with the so-called flu shots.
Exactly.
In the US and also in large parts of Europe. Maybe this might become a very regular routine affair every year in India too, which means that it becomes life as usual kind of a scenario where taking a booster shot to keep COVID at bay becomes extremely commonplace. That's not a bad thing to have if you can keep the virus at bay and also keep the wheels of economy running. Otherwise, everything can come to a screeching halt, which can affect lives, livelihoods,
disastrous consequences. Yes. Gaurav, on that note, we end today's episode of News Decoded, the regular show on Earshot, where we try to explain to our listeners the complex issues concerning their lives, what's in news. Keep listening to Earshot at www.earshot.in and download the Earshot app on your mobiles. Thank you very much, Gaurav, for your time. See you all again.